Dr. Robert Lustig, thank you very much for welcoming us into your home, I believe in the United States, and good evening from Singapore.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. Could you please introduce yourself for our audience?
So, my name is Robert Lustig. I am a pediatric neuroendocrinologist, which means I study how the brain controls hormones and how hormones control the brain. Um, I've been researching obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and metabolism for the past 25 years. And my work has basically taken me from brain tumors to obesity to insulin to metabolic syndrome to sugar to addiction to policy. So I've sort of spanned the gamut over the last 25 years.
Wow. All right. Well, let's jump into it because for a shortage of time, I will advise my listeners to go into YouTube and just Google you because I think the last count I did was 13 million view for your Bitter Truth video. So
Something like that.
there's plenty to view there. And let's just dive into the main thing that we are interested in. So, I'm interested in lifestyle behavior of physician and healthcare worker, and I spend a lot of time dealing with the ill health, both physiological and psychological, of working as physician. So, as such, I've had a terrific interest in how lifestyle behavior, the activity of what we do 24 hours a day, actually do have a massive impact on health. Nutrition is something that we do a lot of that those waking hours. So let's have a dive in into the lifestyle behavior of someone like you. I mean, I've watched you from a distance, like a YouTube, fan, going from one place to the other pre-COVID, and imagining jumping on flights and going to hotels and conference and writing papers and probably teaching, seeing patient and so on, and trying to imagine how the lifestyle of a person like that is, knowing what you know and knowing what you're telling us. So just tell us what that was like before COVID and what has happened since then.
Well, so what I would argue is that I am the absolute best negative role model you will ever meet. I did virtually everything wrong. And to be honest with you, knew that I was doing everything wrong. But, I had a job and the job was all encompassing. And I also had a family and the family was all encompassing. And my bandwidth was very thin. And so taking care of oneself always ends up falling by the wayside. So when I was, a kid, I was a stress eater. When I was in med school, I was the master of the 3-second lunch. I ate very badly. I always had something that had to be done. So cooking was always, sort of secondary. So I got a lot of takeout over the years, and I'm not the one to espouse my philosophy, my you should all follow my example. However, as I started researching obesity, as I started researching metabolic syndrome, and started realizing what the real problems were, not what the food industry told me, which was that I ate too much and exercised too little, but rather what the biochemistry of it was. I did actually make changes in my nutrition, in my life. I started practicing mindfulness. I started giving myself a little bit more time. And ultimately, in 2017, I realized that I could actually take care of 1 million children easier than I could take care of one, and so I clinically retired. And in doing so, I have actually now found not just the opportunity, but the time to be able to actually engage in more healthful practices. So I am much more comfortable in my own skin, and I'm able to follow the precepts that I know are correct, including eating properly, exercising, getting a little bit more sleep than I did before. I have to tell you, when you're writing a book, you can set your alarm for 8 o'clock in the morning, but you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning, whether you like it or not, because the stress, the anxiety, the angst of having to produce is going to ultimately short circuit any ability you have of being able to stay in bed. So, my life is a lot calmer. And I will say that COVID made it a little too calm because I've been basically staring at the same four walls for the past, 14 months. And so I'm ready to sort of get out there. And I'm just delighted that just yesterday the EU said that if you're doubly vaccinated, you can come visit Europe. So maybe I can come visit Singapore too.
Well, that would be great. You'll have to do 14 days quarantine, vaccine or not, but that's okay. That's a must. But so it's actually been good and bad. I hear it's been good in terms of as it impacted your sleep, for example, because we've seen here in the data of Singaporeans sleep change that at the very beginning of the pandemic, people actually readjusted their sleep, so they slept later and they woke up later because they didn't have to commute because it was in lockdown. But as the lockdown stopped, because we only had one, and it was 2 months, people started to shift back and having more anxiety, and then sleep starting to show some decay as well.
We have lost sleep, consistently over the course of the pandemic. You would say, well, if you get to stay in bed, you get more sleep. No, because the anxiety that COVID has produced, both from an economic, financial, medical, standpoint, social standpoint, the isolation, it does exactly the opposite. So we're sort of in the worst of all possible worlds. People don't even want to go out to, partake in exercise because they're afraid. Although we've kind of learned that outside is way better than inside. So people should get out and exercise. People say, well, I can't exercise with a mask on. I don't think you have to. And I think the CDC now has basically said, if you're outside and socially distanced, which you would be if you were running, for instance, or working out outside, you don't have to do. So I think that we need to sort of rethink where we are in the pandemic and what the trade-offs are, what the costs of our current behaviors are versus what the potential benefits are. We're seeing this also in children because my daughter is 15 years old. She has been online since March of last year, and this year has just been hell on her. She has lost her love of learning. She is distracted. She has no structure in her life. All of her physical activity venues have closed. And she is basically a victim of this pandemic, even though she never got the virus. So I think that we are at a point now, an inflection point, where we need to rethink how we are managing ourselves. We know what works, and we need to institute those things while we are waiting for our vaccines.
Right. Wow, that's going to be a big challenge, I think, for a lot of country to get some sort of harmonization and end goal plan that fits the planet rather than fits each individual country. And I think that's part of the challenge
Indeed.
as well.
Yes, it is.
So let's take a step back and address one of these things that I think in Asia, as a French person living in Singapore and having lived in Singapore for a long time and travel around both in Asia and the West, I think there's a bit of a myth here, and maybe I overdo it, but there is a myth that here we suffer from less obesity. So that's not a myth certainly compared to the United States or Britain. So we have less obese population, but we do have a bolus of people with metabolic syndrome and particularly
Indeed.
type 2 diabetes.
Indeed.
And a lot of the time when we raise this issue, a lot of people say, well, that's okay because, these people are we're thin. These people are thin. They don't look fat. They don't look ill. So all these kind of bizarre perceptual problems. So let's hear it from you. And also let's start by defining what we have a lot of here in Asia, and that's TOFIs. So for
Yes.
those of us out there
Indeed.
listening to this and thinking this is not tofu, This is what we eat. This is TOFI. So
Okay.
TOFI is a different thing, and you're going to define this for us.
Indeed. Thank you. So here's the problem. There are uh, there are 240 million adults in the United States. 30% of them are obese. 70% of them are not. 30% are BMI over 30. 70% are BMI under 30. Now, the standard mantra from the doctors and the dietitians and the Institute of Medicine and the National Institutes of Health and the Surgeon General and the White House and Congress and the food industry is the following. 80% of that 30%, 80% of the 30% obese, they're metabolically ill. They get type 2 diabetes, they get hypertension, they get lipid problems, they get cardiovascular disease, they get cancer, they get dementia, they get fatty liver disease, they get polycystic ovarian disease. These 80% of 30%, which comes out when you do the math to be 57 million people, it's all their fault. They're fat and they're sick, and they're sick because they're fat. And if they would only just diet and exercise, we could solve this problem. That's what they say. Garbage. Complete trash. Total, complete trash. Now, sounds right, but it's not right. And here's why it's not right. It is true that 80% of 30% are metabolically ill. I don't argue that. I mean, that's what the data show. I'm totally, comfortable with that. But what that means is that 20% of 30% are not. 20% of 30% obese are actually metabolically healthy. They will live a completely normal life, die at a completely normal age, not cost the taxpayer a dime. They're just fat. They even have normal length telomeres, telomeres being the edges of the chromosomes that unravel, and that's what causes cell aging and cell death and ultimately human death. They have normal length telomeres. These 20% of 30%, we have a name for them. MHO, metabolically healthy obese. These people are not the problem. They have extra baggage. They have extra fat. I don't argue that. Cosmetically undesirable, but metabolically inert. The fat on your body is not the problem. So now let's turn to the normal weight population, 70%, right? 30% obese, 70% normal weight. Of that 70%, 40% have the exact same diseases as do the obese. Normal weight people get type 2 diabetes, hypertension, lipid problems, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian disease, too. And in fact, in Singapore, the thinner you are, the more likely you are to get them. Believe it or not. Now, the question is, how come normal weight people get these diseases too, if they're normal weight? And the answer is because it's not about the fat you can see. It's about the fat you can't see. Now, where is that fat? That fat is not is not subcutaneous. It's not big butt fat. It's not the fat that gives you a size 18 dress. It's or the extra large pants. That fat is either in the belly, called visceral fat, or it's in the liver fat. And anyone, no matter what their weight, even thin people, can have visceral fat and liver fat. Let me give you an example. Clinical depression. People who are clinically depressed, they don't eat. People who are clinically depressed, they lose weight. But if you stick them in an MRI machine and actually look at the fat in their belly, they have increased visceral fat compared to people who don't have depression. They're losing weight but gaining fat. But not the fat you can see. It's the fat inside. And it's that visceral fat that goes straight to the liver and causes the liver to be dysfunctional, and that's what ultimately causes chronic metabolic disease. Or it can be right in the liver itself. And if it's right in the liver, it causes that chronic metabolic disease immediately. So if you gain about 10 kilos, your subcutaneous fat will make enough bad proteins called cytokines to ultimately impact your metabolic health. So if you gain about 22 pounds to 25 pounds, that'll potentially take you from being metabolically healthy to metabolically ill. And you could see that fat. But if you develop abdominal fat or visceral fat, you could go from metabolically healthy to metabolically ill in about 4 pounds instead of 25 pounds. And you may not see those 4 pounds. And if you stand on the scale, you may not know that those 4 pounds are any different from before. And finally, if you develop liver fat, it's a half a pound. A half a pound of fat in the liver will cause metabolic dysfunction. So that you're not going to be able to see that on the scale at all. So thin people can have liver fat, and that liver fat will make you just as metabolically unhealthy as the person whose BMI is 40. So it's the fat you can't see rather than the fat you can. Now, the question is, where do those different fat depots come from? And the answer is, well, in the case of the subcutaneous or big butt fat, that's due to high insulin driving energy into those fat cells. In the case of the visceral fat, that's high cortisol from stress. And in the case of liver fat, that's from sugar. Very specifically from sugar, because the sugar goes to the liver can't process that sugar in the same way it can't process the alcohol, which is why you end up having a serum alcohol level, which is why you get drunk. Because if your liver could process the alcohol, it would never make it to the brain. You would never get drunk. So the sugar is metabolized virtually identically to that of alcohol in the liver. You overwhelm your liver's capacity. Your liver has no choice but to take the excess, turn it into fat, and now you've got fat in the liver and you haven't even gained any weight. And you're just as metabolically ill. We have a name for this. It's called TOFI, T-O-F-I, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, real medical term, 1,500 citations, coined by Dr. Jimmy Bell, who's a neuroimager at University College London. Real thing. So the question is, to your listeners right now, is, are you a TOFI? Do you know? Does your doctor know? If your doctor knows, why hasn't your doctor said anything about it? What would you do about it if you did know? These are the questions that we have to be able to answer to dig ourselves out of this metabolic trap that we have set for ourselves. And unfortunately, people are only worried about the fat they can see. They're only worried about the obesity. Turns out the obesity is not the problem. The obesity is the marker of the problem. It is downstream of the problem. The problem is the metabolic dysfunction. And the obesity is just a way of saying, yeah, more likely you have metabolic dysfunction because of it. So everyone is at risk of metabolic syndrome. Everyone's at risk of being a TOFI. Everyone's at risk of having liver fat. Now, prior to 1980, if you had fat in your liver, you were an alcoholic. There was no other cause of fat in the liver other than being an alcoholic. Well, today, 20% of American children have fat in their liver, unrelated to their weight. 20%. Now, where did that fat come from? They don't drink alcohol. Turns out it's because they drink sugar. And because the sugar, the fructose molecule, the sweet molecule in sugar, is metabolized in the liver virtually identically to that of alcohol. Kids get fatty liver. They get the disease of alcohol without alcohol. And when you have fat in your liver, now you have insulin resistance, now you have chronic metabolic disease, and now you have all of those downstream diseases that we just mentioned: type 2 diabetes, hypertension, lipid problems, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, etc. So you want to get better, you want to get fixed, you want this problem to go away, you got to get the fat out of your liver. And the question is, how do you do that? And that is what we will talk about next, no doubt.
Okay. Right. So one question that I have in my mind when I hear what you just said is in the context of the situation that we're all in right now, which is we are in this pandemic. We've been in this pandemic now for 15 months. So prior to COVID, you visited Singapore. Before, you know that Singapore is very high priced for its variety of food, that
Mhm.
it is a foodie place. We
It
have
is.
both very high standard Western food and local food. There's a huge variety of food. So people tended to eat out a lot, and it is part of a joy. I won't use the term pleasure because that would be something we'll discuss later. But
Yes.
it is a big joy for people to meet together and to eat together and to share a meal. So prior to this, this was effectively part of the culture, and it came with the problems that you just described, which is people do have type 2 diabetes. There's a huge amount of metabolic syndrome problem here, and we have also signs of early brain aging problem in dementia in the community. So
Yeah.
that was the case before. So now we've gone through 2 months of severe lockdown where people relied on food delivery, and food has become, because we can't travel at all, food has become the last thing that's left on the, so to speak, on the plate,
Understood.
to have some sort of joy in the day and to have some sort of variety. So people have relied, have eaten more, they've eaten more out, they've ordered things. Most of the environment that you see in Singapore driving around is you see all these delivery motorcycles everywhere. And it's not just junk food and ultra processed food, it's also top restaurants have gone into delivery. In my mind, I hear that stress is a pathway to metabolic illnesses
It
through
is.
glucocorticoids. I'm hearing that normal food can be if you're eating the wrong food and you're not doing what needs to be done to check whether you can handle it. So now we've had severe stress for months. We've had a rebound consumption on food, which is unlikely to be broccoli or kumquat, or it's likely to be whatever. It's something that's nefarious for you, and it's not stopping. And also drinking has been on the up as well, and not just soda. So I'm thinking, isn't that a kind of really catch-22 hellish situation?
Absolutely. So 6 weeks into the pandemic here in the United States, I, like everyone else, I had to mask up and at the time glove up, and I had to go to the grocery store for provisions as well. And I was just shocked at what I saw in the store. All the produce was there. What wasn't there was the pasta and the candy and the breakfast cereal, of course, the toilet paper too. But the things that were missing from a food standpoint were all high sugar, ultra processed food items. Not the produce, not the meat, not the chicken. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the ultra processed food. You said something that I want to take exception with, Dr. Jennings. You said that this is like the only joy that people still have. And that's the wrong word. I'm going to call you on that word because it is not about the joy. It is about the reward. Okay, this is reward. This is dopamine. Dopamine is reward. Dopamine is also learning and positive reinforcement. And that is what drives appetite, and that is what drives the consumption of very specifically sugar. And in fact, all that ultra-processed food that I've just mentioned, that's what's driving it. And we know that this is true, not just because of neuroimaging and physiological studies, but we even know this is true in terms of economics. There is a phenomenon that economists study called price elasticity. So price elasticity is If the price of a specific commodity or foodstuff, in this case, goes up 1%, how much reduction in consumption will you see because of the price rise? Okay? A food that is completely price elastic will go to zero. So if the price goes up, consumption goes down because you've reduced effective availability. The most price elastic food is eggs. So when the price of eggs go up, consumption goes way down. But price inelasticity means that even when the price goes up, consumption stays up. And that's a sign of hedonic effects. That's a sign of reward. That's a sign of dopamine. And so what are the three most price inelastic foods? Fast food, soft drinks, juice. All high sugar items. And the reason is because sugar is addictive. Sugar, in the same way alcohol is, activates the reward center of the brain up here called the nucleus accumbens. It causes a dopamine surge. And what that tells your brain is, this feels good, I want more. And so you eat more. Now, this can happen whether you are obese, or it can happen whether you are thin. So it's not related to specifically obesity. However, if you're obese, the number of receptors for dopamine go down because dopamine downregulates its own receptor. Virtually every biochemical in the body downregulates its own receptor on purpose because you don't want to overdo it. And so your body has a fail-safe mechanism to try to limit your response. It downregulates the receptor. And in the process, that means you need more and more to get less and less. And so this is the law of diminishing returns, also known as tolerance. And so sugar induces tolerance, but it also induces dependence and it also induces withdrawal. In fact, in the extreme, sugar is addictive. So, not everybody's addicted to sugar, in the same way that not everyone's addicted to alcohol. In the same way, for that matter, not everyone's addicted to nicotine. In the same way, believe it or not, that not everyone's addicted to cocaine. Pretty much everyone's addicted to heroin once they start it. But, so that's pretty strong addiction. But all the other things that we can be addicted to, okay, there's a penetrance. Not everyone gets it. About 20% of people are alcoholics. 20%. I mean, it's very large. They hide it. They make excuses for it. They don't want to admit it, whatever. But 20% of people have an alcohol problem. About the same have a sugar problem. And in fact, the good thing about that is they'll admit it to you. Oh, I have a horrible sweet tooth. That's sugar addiction. How many people do you know who say that? Oh, I have a horrible sweet tooth. Because that's socially acceptable. Oh, I'm a raging alcoholic. That's not socially acceptable. So, in fact, we know that sugar and alcohol, because of the way they are metabolized in the liver and in the brain, which are virtually identical, and in terms of their effects on the reward system and their effects on economics, we know that sugar is addictive. We have the imaging studies, we have the physiological studies to demonstrate that. So COVID exposed this in a big way because sugar-containing foods, ultra-processed foods, are cheaper. And so people gravitated toward those in particular during this pandemic for the reward, because there was nothing else, and because they were less expensive, because they're subsidized. And so we now have an addiction problem and also a metabolism problem. And this will outlive the pandemic in major ways in terms of metabolic and mental health.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a nice sort of link to some of the things that you've hit upon in your book, The Hacking of the American Mind. So, for my audience, I will put the links in the podcast notes. You've written two books and three now. One that's about to be released, or if it's already released. The first one was Fat Chance, which as explains in great detail basically the mechanism of this misconception about how we get fat and what are the mechanism of becoming fat. And then in the hacking of the American mind, which I really thought was, you could have called it the hacking of the universal human mind, because we're all subject to this.
Right. In fact, the title outside of America was the hacking of the contemporary mind. So I hear you.
Yeah, but and I think you explained something extremely elegantly, which is confused by a lot of people. And I by using the term joy, I actually meant relief. But it highlights how complex the difference between reward, happiness, and just pleasure and happiness is. And for a lot of people, it's just a semantic difference, and they don't really get
Right.
that actually it's a different thing altogether, not just semantically. So
It
I
is.
would like to go back to this before we talk about your new book, and then connect it to the situation we're in right now, where our mind has been hacked also by the pandemic, because a lot of us don't know how we're going to get out of it, how much has changed. So the stress, the glucocorticoids are constantly there. We've
That's right.
also changed our lifestyle habits, more or less. We've changed our sleep. We may have changed our physical activity. We definitely have changed our food. And then a lot of us, including young people, have basically tripled the amount of time that they spend online. But not just them, we all have done, because again, this was our last window into the world.
Right.
So can you speak about the relationship between these three diabolical forces that we're facing,
Right.
and how they are really not going to, or maybe they're going to do something good for us. I don't know. I just can't see it. But how to use them in something that is not so diabolical.
Right. So you brought up this my book, The Hacking of the American Mind, where in it I dissect this conundrum, this conflagration that has occurred over the last 50 years in particular between two terms that we have basically confused and conflated together: pleasure and happiness. Most people think they're the same. They are not. They never were, but there's reasons why marketers have put those two together. So let's define the 7 differences between pleasure and happiness and why it matters. So, number 1, pleasure is short lived, like a meal. Happiness is long lived, like a lifetime or like a relationship. Pleasure is visceral, you feel it in your body. Happiness is ethereal, you feel it above the neck. Pleasure is taking, like from a casino. Happiness is giving, like to Habitats for Humanity or to a charity. Pleasure is achievable with substances. Happiness is not achievable with substances. Pleasure is achieved alone. Happiness is usually achieved in social groups. Number 6, the extremes of pleasure, whether it be substances or behaviors, and it doesn't matter. So the substances can be cocaine, nicotine, alcohol, heroin, sugar. The behaviors can be shopping, gambling, internet gaming, social media, pornography. In the extreme, all lead to addiction. There's an aholic after every one of those: shopaholic, chocoholic, sexaholic, alcoholic, etc. Whereas there's no such thing as being addicted to too much happiness. And finally, number 7, and the reason for the book: pleasure is dopamine, happiness is serotonin. 2 different neurotransmitters, 2 different sets of receptors, 2 different areas of the brain, 2 different mechanisms of action. So, like, why do we care? So what? Well, there's a reason. it matters. And the reason is because dopamine downregulates its own receptor. And it needs to, because dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. And all excitatory neurotransmitters, when released chronically, can lead to cell death. Chronic excitation of any neuron can lead to neuronal cell death. Now, cells don't want to die. Neurons don't want to die. But if the chronic dopamine keeps coming, the cell has no choice but to try to down-regulate the gain in an attempt to try to save itself. What they do is they reduce the number of receptors. So there's less likely that any given dopamine molecule will find a receptor and thereby transduce the signal. This is the phenomenon we call tolerance. And tolerance is the first step to addiction. Now, serotonin, on the other hand, is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It doesn't stimulate, it inhibits. And what it inhibits is a set of neurons that would normally give you anxiety. So in the presence of serotonin, you experience lack or paucity of anxiety, which we read out as emotional well-being. So reward and emotional well-being are not the same thing. Okay? Reward and contentment are not the same thing. So we want to keep our dopamine relatively low. I mean, bursts of it are fine. It's great to have a piece of birthday cake, but if you have a piece of birthday cake for every meal, because the amount of sugar in every single item that you buy at the store is, the same as a birthday cake, then it becomes a little bit of a problem. So you want to keep your dopamine relatively low, except for these bursts, and you want to keep your serotonin high. Now, there's one more factor, which you mentioned there were three, and that's cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Cortisol is the fight or flight. It's the thing that basically gears you up for battle. And it works on various parts of the brain as well. The part of the brain that cortisol works on that's particularly egregious in this story is the part of your brain right in the front, right behind your forehead. And it's called the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is your executive function center. It is your don't do stupid things center. It is your Jiminy Cricket from like Pinocchio to keep you from doing stupid things. It's the part of your brain that can predict the future and can keep you from doing something that you might regret. It's the part of your brain that says, this has consequences. So maybe I ought to be a little bit more careful. Cortisol deactivates it. Cortisol basically puts it into a state of suspended animation. And so when cortisol is high, you are only worried about right now. You cannot see the future. You cannot see what phenomena your actions today will cause tomorrow. And so when stress is high, it, number one, releases dopamine and causes dopamine to go even higher. And so it is the combination of reward and stress that leads to addiction. And in addition, on the serotonin side, the increase in cortisol causes you to feel lousy. So you already have a low serotonin because of your diet and because of metabolic syndrome. Then you add stress on top of that, and the combination of those two lead to depression. Addiction, due to the unleashing of dopamine. Depression, due to the suppression of serotonin. Addiction, depression, two sides of the same coin, driven by the same factors. Processed food, sleep deprivation, technology, drugs, all because of an increase in dopamine and a decrease in serotonin. So the phenomena that we associate with this pandemic are because of the stress on top of these two neurotransmitter systems. It's very understandable. It's very logical. It makes sense with our, with our ontogeny, if you will, with our evolution. The question, of course, is what to do about it now.
Yeah, and that's, I think, in the mind of everybody, because it's clearly the case that this is not going to be terribly short term. It already isn't.
No,
And I think for a whole category of, it's one thing if you're middle age, or if you're older, you can maybe have more thing under your wings and more memory that you can bank and live on for a little longer. But for young people, it's been really, really rough.
it is.
And I think that the world has just shut in so many ways. And I think to have hope, if you're at uni, to have aspiration, to think what the world is going to be like, when will it be back to something that we understand, is a real challenge. And what would you suggest for younger crowd to focus on? Something very concrete and
Yeah.
doable.
I'm going to be very honest with you. This is very difficult, and it's particularly difficult for the new generation, for the generation coming up now. And the reason that it's particularly difficult for them is because they don't know the difference between pleasure and happiness. They've never experienced the difference between pleasure and happiness. And the reason is because they've been told that pleasure is happiness. And they've believed it. And do you know who told them that pleasure is happiness? Social media.
Google.
Yes.
No, yes.
That's right. It's exactly right. And you can actually see, in terms of the secular trends, you can actually see the increase in depression and the increase in suicide that started in 2007 with the advent of the iPhone. We did not have this before the iPhone. We had Blackberries before 2007, but we didn't have depression and suicide. We also didn't have cyberbullying, which is like the biggest stress. So this generation coming up now is experiencing this phenomenon of increased engagement digitally, which is the absolute opposite of emotional well-being. You're not generating any serotonin. All you're generating is cortisol, which makes you more and more depressed. And therefore, when you're told that this product will bring you happiness, whether it's a Coca-Cola or a box of Raisin Bran, or this new video game, Fortnite or whatever, you don't know the difference, and so you're prone to believe it because you've never actually understood the difference and experienced the difference between pleasure and happiness, between reward and contentment. Reward became contentment for this generation. And so this is particularly egregious for them because they have to basically find their way out of this dilemma virtually themselves, and with everybody on social media telling them otherwise. So this is a major problem for this current upcoming generation, Gen Z. And I'm very, very, very worried about it. There are things that can be done, but they have to understand the problem before they would, ever undertake any kind of, remediative action. There are 4 things that people can do to lower their dopamine, raise their serotonin, and tamp down on their cortisol. 4 things. And in my book, I call them the 4 C's. They're the last 4 chapters of the book. And I'll name them just very quickly. Number 1, connect. And that does not mean Facebook. That means eye-to-eye, face-to-face connection. And there's a reason that it works. It's because that eye-to-eye, face-to-face connection actually activates a set of neurons in your occipital lobe, in your visual cortex, called mirror neurons. And so you end up taking on the emotions of the person you are talking to. And this then translates into a phenomenon that everyone sort of knows about called empathy. And empathy generates serotonin. The feeling of empathy generates serotonin. But you can't get empathy out of a digital image. You can't get empathy out of, writing on Twitter. That's not empathy. That's rage. That's dopamine. That's not serotonin. So connection. Number 2, contribution. Okay, contribute. Now, that does not mean to your 401k. That does not mean to your retirement account. That means to other people. You have to basically extend yourself to others. So a charity, a hobby that that lends joy to others. Now, you can actually develop, get joy from work if you think that your work helps others and if your boss can see it too. So, for instance, your work, Florence, my work, gives us contentment and gives us contribution because we can see how our work helps others, because we sure aren't making money at it, that's for sure. So, number 3, cope. And cope means 3 things: sleep, mindfulness, exercise. The problem is children today get less sleep than ever before. Children who charge their cell phones in their room get 28 minutes less sleep than children who charge their cell phones outside their rooms, not just because of the activity, but because of the blue light, because the blue light interferes with melatonin synthesis. So another reason why cell phones are a problem. Mindfulness. So everybody thinks you have to multitask today. The problem is only 2.5% of the world can actually do it. Everyone else is serially unitasking. And every time you switch from one task to another, what do you think you get? You get a cortisol bump. And also it takes 23 minutes to refocus. So you're actually losing time and increasing stress through the process of quote, multitasking, which no one's doing. And then finally, exercise. And exercise alone can actually reverse depression. And if you combine mindfulness plus exercise, you can completely alleviate depression without medicines. So, cope. And then number 4, the last one, cook. And the reason is because there's stuff in the food that matters. Tryptophan, which is the rarest amino acid, is the precursor to serotonin. We're all serotonin deficient. We need more tryptophan to be able to make more serotonin. Problem is, not all foods have tryptophan. The food that has the most tryptophan is eggs. The next highest on the list is poultry. Okay, fish. Eggs, poultry, fish, not exactly processed food. Omega-3 fatty acids help serotonin neurotransmission. You get that in fish too, and flax. And finally, sugar is the antithesis of serotonin. It's the thing that lowers serotonin. And so what you want is a high tryptophan, high omega-3, low sugar diet. That's called real food. Unfortunately, what we're getting at the store during COVID is a low tryptophan, low omega-3, high sugar diet. That's called processed food. So we're making ourselves worse by what we're eating and because we're allowing other people to choose what it is that we're eating. So there are things that you can do. The problem is they are antithetical to our current situation and our COVID crisis. And if you don't know what the problem is, you can't solve a problem.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, to move on to something maybe a little bit more hopeful, although given the title of your latest book, I'm not so sure there's a lot of hopefulness in there.
There is.
But please
is.
let us know. I mean, this is a great title. So your latest book is called Metabolical. I haven't had the pleasure to read it yet because it's not out for the lay people.
No one's read it yet because it's being released a week from today.
Okay, great.
May 4th.
So I don't feel FOMO then. That's great.
No.
So tell us all about it then, since you're the author.
Okay. So Metabolical says that what I said previously is wrong. How's that? It's my mea culpa. It's my response. Here's the problem. You are always told, and the food industry is the one who tells you this. They tell you, you are what you eat. Fat Chance, my very first book, which I came out in 2013, qualified that. I think that's wrong. I don't think that's correct. I thought at the time it was you are what you do with what you eat. That the metabolism of those foodstuffs has everything to do with your level of physical health. But what I've now realized from doing the research and also seeing all the politics play out over these past 10 years is that even I got it wrong back then. So I've written this book to qualify it. It's not you are what you eat. It's not you are what you do with what you eat. Rather, it is you are what they did with what you eat. Because it is the food processing that changes the food and changes it from being something that confers health to something that confers illness. Food is food. All food is inherently good. It's what we do to the food that's not. So the question is, how do you know whether a piece of, any given food is good? And the answer is, for a food to be healthy, it has to satisfy two criteria, just two. 6 words, 2 clauses. Here they are. Ready? Memorize the 6 words. Protect the liver, feed the gut. Any food that does those 2 things is healthy. Any food that does neither of those 2 things is poison. And any food that does one or the other, but not both, is somewhere in the middle. Unfortunately, the only foods that do both are real food. Because real food protects the liver and feeds the gut. Okay, protect the liver from what? What are we protecting the liver from? Well, as we talked about earlier in the program, protect the liver from the onslaught of sugar, because sugar is metabolized like alcohol and causes that liver fat. And if you get the fat out of the liver, you become insulin sensitive, and so your chronic metabolic disease abates. In addition, you want to protect the liver from branched chain amino acids. Now, branched chain amino acids sound like they would be good. Leucine, isoleucine, valine. These are essential amino acids. You have to consume them. That's true. They are 20% of muscle. And this is why bodybuilders, scoop out protein powder to add to their shakes, because that's what protein powder is branched chain amino acids. And if you're building muscle and you're pumping iron, you need that muscle. You need those branched chain amino acids. That's true. And that's where the amino acids go, is to the muscle. But what if you're not a bodybuilder? What if you're just a mere mortal like me? And you take in excess branched chain amino acids, which, by the way, are in corn-fed beef, chicken, and fish. That's where they're the highest. And the reason we know that is because that's the marbling. That's what happens to the muscle when you have excess branched chain amino acids. You get the marbling, like U.S. beef, as opposed to, say, Singaporean beef, which is much more homogeneous. So if you're not building muscle and you take in excess branched chain amino acids, where do they go? They go to the liver. The liver takes the amino group off. Now, instead of a branched chain amino acid, now they're a branched chain organic acid. Those enter the Krebs cycle, the metabolic machinery of the mitochondria. Mitochondria can't process the whole thing because there's too much. You get the tsunami. The mitochondria then throw off the excess, and that excess becomes liver fat. And so you drive that chronic metabolic disease from the insulin resistance from the liver fat because of the branched chain amino acids that were in the corn-fed beef, chicken, and fish. Again, ultra-processed food. In addition, heavy metals. In addition, glyphosate. In addition, other pesticides and obesogens that are in our environment. So protect the liver. And then number 2, feed the gut. We'll feed the gut what? So each of us is 10 trillion cells, but our intestine has 100 trillion bacteria. The bacteria actually outnumber us 10 to 1. Now they got to eat something to live. The question is, what do they eat? Well, they eat what you eat. The question is, how much did you get versus how much did they get? When you consume your food with fiber, soluble and insoluble, like an apple, you're getting both. So soluble fibers like pectins, like what holds jelly together, or inulin. Insoluble fibers like cellulose, like the stringy stuff in celery. An apple has both. You consume the apple, the cellulose, the insoluble fiber, forms a lattice work like a fishnet. The soluble fiber plugs the holes in that fishnet. And together, they form an impenetrable barrier, a secondary barrier on the inside of the intestine, which reduces the rate of absorption of nutrients from the gut into the bloodstream, thus protecting the liver. In addition, because you didn't absorb them early, they go further down the intestine where the bacteria are. And then the bacteria get to chew them up. So you're feeding the gut. In addition, soluble fiber, that pectin and inulin, those feed the colonic bacteria specifically, and those turn the soluble fiber into something called short chain fatty acids, butyrate and propionate, which turn out to be immunosuppressive and anti-insulin, which improve metabolic health. Now, what happens if you don't feed the gut? Turns out those bacteria are not going to give up without a fight. They're not just going to turn over and die. They will epson layer right off your intestinal epithelial cells. And what that does is that exposes those intestinal epithelial cells to the inside of the intestine, all those contents that are pretty toxic, with lots of bacteria and cytokines and bad stuff. And you end up having inflammation in your gut. You end up breaching the gut wall, called leaky gut. And that leads to cytokines and lipopolysaccharides and bacteria entering your bloodstream, which causes inflammation, which then causes insulin resistance and chronic metabolic disease also. So protect the liver, feed the gut. Low sugar to protect the liver, high fiber to feed the gut. Well, so what's a low sugar, high fiber diet called? Real food. What's a high sugar, low fiber diet called? Processed food. Processed food is the bad guy in this story. And in the book, I basically take people through how we got to where we are, why processed food took over, what keeps it propped up, how Big Pharma has actually capitalized on this phenomenon to actually make money while hurting us, and how big government has also capitalized because they make money off the tariffs of ultra-processed food. So this is big food, big pharma, and big government against us. And people have to understand that this is what's going on. This is the war. And you're in the middle of it. You're an unwitting combatant. And if you don't even understand it, then you can't solve it. You can't solve it for yourself, and you can't solve it for society. And that's the reason I wrote the book.
So you wrote a book to make friends then?
Or lose them.
Well, yes. I mean, this is yes. You've made friends of the readers, but I'm sure in terms of the impact on the actors that you talked about, it's very significant. So, what's the full title of the book? Is it Metabolical? There is a subtitle to it.
So if you're getting the American version, which is on Amazon, you can pre-order. It's called Metabolical: The Lure and the Lies of Processed Food, Nutrition, and Modern Medicine. If you're getting the UK version, which might be the case in Singapore, then it's called Metabolical: How Processed Food Poisons People and the Planet. And if you're getting the German version, it's in German.
Okay, and we'll put the link to the French version when it comes out.
Okay, well, I hope so.
Well, that's going to be most likely just as extremely well documented and extremely relevant as the first two, one Fat Chance and The Hacking of the American Mind, for the auditor if they haven't actually had a chance to read these two books. And I highly recommend all of the material that you put online, because not only is it medically and scientifically a joy to hear, but it's also extremely important. It can be delivered in classrooms. It can be delivered in work environments. It's still very, very, very valuable, and it's free. It's online, so I really recommend that people check you out.
I appreciate it.
If you have, I know you do have in the United States. In the United States, you have a non profit organization that's called Real Food, if I'm not
Eat
wrong.
Real, eatreal.org. And so what we do is we get real food into American schools. Right now, the largest fast food franchise in the world is the American school system. And we need to turn that around in order to improve our children's health and improve our children's grades. So we are working right now with 213 school districts from around the country to rethink how they provide food to children during the school day. And it's a programmatic effort to actually change the food procurement, the food preparation, and the food production for children, and get them real food instead of processed food so that they can. In one school district, we got rid of 270,000 pounds of sugar in 1 year out of kids' diets.
Well, that just gives an idea what was there.
Right. So we're very comfortable and very happy with what we're doing. And if people want to understand what we're doing or want to contribute or want to, maybe replicate it outside of the United States, which would be lovely. Okay, you can go to eatreal.org or contact me. I'm easy to find. Everyone seems to find me. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all those other places. Contact me and we will get you started.
Well, Singapore, if you're hearing this, if somebody wants to do this, that would be a great idea. We could all use it, and we could have this initiative here in Singapore. That would be great. So, Robert, it was really a joy a joy. I said that word again, to speak with you.
Now you can use it. Now you can use
It was true happiness. It was true serotonin, which really I'm getting to rethink my Twitter handle. Really, I should switch from dopamine to serotonin for sure. But I want to conclude with two things. Number one, what we always ask all our guests, since you have achieved so much in your life and you're contributing so much to the lives of other people, both scientifically, in education, and really giving out time as you're doing today. So I wanted to for you to share with our audience what's the weird sauce that powers your life. So that's the first question, and then I will finish with a question around the book called Pure, White, and Deadly that you prefaced from John Yudkin. And in that book, he says a lot of very, very forward things that we're all living through right now. And that book was written a long time ago. And what has motivated you to do the preface for that book? Because that book is now very hard to find. It's not available on e-version. It's only available if you order via a hard copy, and it's very difficult to get outside the United States. So I was wondering what led you to do the preface for this book, which is, I think, extraordinary, and the life of this man is also extraordinary. And then you following on his footstep, taking on the big battle with big food and many other big things, big pharma, big medicine, and so on. So could you please let us know these two things?
So, with respect to Pure, White, and Deadly, I did not know John Yudkin, the author of Pure, White, and Deadly, from a hole in the wall. I, in fact, knew his cousin, John S. Yudkin, and thought they were the same people. John S. Yudkin is a diabetologist in the UK, and he had written on several things that I knew about. So I thought they were the same person. Didn't know about the real John Yudkin, who, passed away in 1995, and certainly didn't know about his book, Pure, White, and Deadly. I was at a meeting in Adelaide, Australia in 2008, talking about how sugar is metabolized and how ultimately sugar poisons the liver and becomes a toxin. And a colleague came up to me and said, "Well, surely you've read Yudkin." And I said, "Excuse me? No, you mean John S. Yudkin?" "No, no, no, no. John Yudkin, his cousin." I go, "No, no, I don't know anything about him." So I went and I researched the book. I couldn't find it in our own library. I had to get it from an interlibrary loan, and then read it. And I realized, oh my God, this guy got this, 27 years earlier. He knew and had published it. And so I felt like I was rediscovering something. Number one, I felt much smaller, but I also felt that, obviously there was a reason why he got thrown a bus. And so that really made me think that, something was up here, that something was not, as we say in America, kosher about what was going on and how this all transpired. So I mentioned John Yudkin in my YouTube video, The Sugar and the Bitter Truth. And I got contacted by his son, Michael. And he thanked me profusely. And then it turned out, because I'd mentioned it in the YouTube video, Penguin UK came to him and wanted to reissue the book. And he asked me if I would write the introduction, which was a great honor. And we have stayed friends ever since. In fact, I am looking right now at one of John Yudkin's personal possessions. It's an Arabic tapestry that Michael gave me. And underneath, in English, it says, "Kill your enemy with sugar," which I thought was very apropos. Now, the option you asked me, I think, because we had some technical difficulties, some freezing, is what my secret sauce is.
What's your weird sauce? Yes.
My weird sauce, right. My weird sauce is that I used to believe what I was told, and now I don't. And I've learned that I can't believe what I'm told. I have to research it for myself. So I'll ask you a question, Florence. What is the difference between marketing and propaganda?
Yes.
People think they're the same.
The intent?
Well, sort of a little bit. The intent is to push your point of view. That the question is strategy. Marketing is using information to espouse your point of view. Propaganda is using disinformation to espouse your point of view. The difference is the truth. When you tell the truth about a product or a philosophy or a concept, you're marketing. When you tell a lie about it, that's propaganda. The point is that there are a lot of people who are selling propaganda. And it can be political realm. We've seen that in the last 4 years. It can be in the economic and industrial realm. It can be in the medical realm. It can be in any realm. The point is, everyone has a reason for marketing, but only certain people have a reason for propaganda. And the goal of life is to sort the two and know what the story is. Bottom line, you have to research it for yourself. You can't believe everything you're told. Not even from me. That's my weird sauce.
Well, that's something that needs to be thought of for a while, I think, and pondered by a lot of people who are listening to this probably. Especially in Singapore, we are big on getting things from institution. We are obedient. We like things in order. We like to listen to things. So having the advice to check things, get involved with the data, even if it's hard, even if it demands that you check a few terms here and there, just be the master of your ship. In other words, that's what I've heard you say.
And you have to be open to the scientific method.
Yes, that's an essential training in life, and unfortunately, in Singapore, we're doing very well on this. I don't know whether the schooling system in the United States is really looking into STEM and the scientific method per se
We are not.
as a way to form mind, as the way to teach how to think.
That's right. And it's one of the reasons why we have the problem we have today. It's one of the reasons why the last 4 years have been so difficult, is because people don't know how to think.
Well, on this theme, I would like to thank you very much for appearing on Weird Sauce. It's been a real happiness and generation moment for me. I hope it has been for the audience. I'm sure it has been very enlightening. I hope that you will be entertaining coming back when your book is really well into the hands of everybody and it's created the buzz that the first two has created already.
I hope you're right.
It'll be a joy to have you again.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Be well, be safe, and hopefully we'll see you in Singapore sometime not too in the distant future, if I can say so.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Indeed. Thank you again.
Thank you.
For our audience in Singapore who would be interested in the program mentioned by Dr. Lustig in this episode, and primarily Eat Real initiative, we are encouraging you to contact us and to let us know whether you would be interested. Eat Real is a project that was started in the United States, and it's made of a team and board that are a passionate group of individuals with a deep experience in health, nutrition, pediatrics, and education food system. So if you would like to launch this initiative alongside what Dr. Lustig was talking about during a podcast, please do not hesitate to contact us so we have the opportunity to launch an Eat Real chapter in Singapore. If this conversation stopped you in your track, share it with your network. You never know whose life you might change for the better. Thank you for listening. Stay curious about our next guest and stay curious about life.